Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're having a good day. Mine was kind of lazy and fun. Uh, I did vote, and I hope all of you that had the opportunity to vote took that opportunity. Today, I want to address two books. One of them is called Willodeen. I don't know if you can see the cover very well, but it is a picture of an animal. You can see his bright yellow eyes, and then if you look down here, you can see his tusk. And if you can see further down, you can see the beginning of a nose. Willowdene is a cross between a boar or a pig and a porcupine and kind of a beaver because his quills are in his flat tail. He's a member of the Screecher group, the Screecher family. And if you can figure out why their names are Screecher, you're ahead of the game. It's Screecher because that's the sound they make. They sound like screech like that. I think, of course, I haven't heard them, but in my mind, that's what they would sound like. Um, They, but the title of the book is Willowdeen, and that's about the young girl who is the main character and has a special relationship with the environment and with the animals that live there. This entire book, of course, is a big fantasy with amazing characters. The ones that are made up, the animals, they're fantastic. They're interesting. They're silly. One of them is called a humming bear, which is like a little teeny hummingbird, but it's a bear, and it has lights at night so you can see them fly. Kind of like a cross between a lightning bug and a hummingbird and a little teeny tiny bear. Um, the Screecher is a big character, and one character that plays a huge part but is hardly mentioned till the very end is a peacock snail. Now, just shut your eyes and kind of imagine what that peacock snail looks like. It's will be different in everybody's imagination, and isn't that what books are all about? Anyway, Willowdene loves nature and spends a lot of time alone in the forest near her community. Her parents and brother were killed during a forest fire, and she ends up living with these two old ladies that are called herbalists. Or some people say they're witches, but they're very kind to Willowdene, and they give her lots of really healthy, good advice, and they let her kind of make her own decisions with their guidance. Well, the screechers here are called pests because of their noise and because they scare away the tourist. Now, the city relies upon tourists, the community relies upon business from the tourists when they come to see the migration of the hummingbears. But what has happened? The tourists don't come because of the noise, because of the fear, because they're very fearsome looking animals, but they're not very dangerous per se. They're not attackers or aggressive or predators. They just make a lot of noise. So the city council, in the best intentions, like many, many decisions are made, decides to put a bounty or price on the screechers. And boy, is that successful. Eventually, they're all killed or they all flee to find a safer environment. Well, Willowdene was so distressed by that. She was so sad because she knew the screechers were just part of the environment. And there had to be a reason that the hummingbears were now leaving after all the screechers are dead. So here you go. They get rid of the screechers thinking to help the tourism environment. And in the process, they've gotten rid of something that apparently is essential to the survival of the hummingbirds. Anyway, this is a prime example of bad decisions not being thought through or not even considered that it might have a bad result. Well, Willowdene discovers the problem. She approaches very boldly and very fearfully. I can do both. Very boldly and very fearfully, and to the city council and makes her presentation, and they're real hesitant. But they eventually come to a conclusion, and I don't know if you'll. I'm not going to tell you what it is because I want you to read the book and see what the city council has decided based upon Willowdene's research and observations. It's a good example that a young person can really have an impact on the environment and the society. Now, this book is an environmental book. It's a fairy tale, but its purpose is to teach about the interrelationships and the symbiosis between different species within an environment or a community. And this will generate a lot of discussion, not only about the fantastic creatures, but it will also generate a lot of discussion about the consequences of making poor decisions when you're thinking make good decisions that can end up in causing havoc in the community's environment and the ecological system. I highly recommend this book. I find that it's teaches a moral in a very fun and fanciful way. I wanted to point out a couple of good quotes from here. One of them was talking about change and how struggling she's having convincing people to change. And one of the herbalists says, change takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. What a great discussion question if you have the time with your child. What a great thought to even think about yourself. The other comment about change is coming as certain as sunrise. The only question is how we deal with it. I always used to tell my students that if they weren't changing, they must be dead, because that's the only thing I can think of that should keep you from changing. And the last quote that really I thought was very perceptive was, with enough whispers, you can make a roar. And that was one of the points of the story, that Willodeen made a roar. This received a 5 on Amazon, and I can certainly see why. The vocabulary is simple. There's a couple of the hummingbirds and the screechers and the peacock snails. Those are all kind of, well, they're not really normal words because they're not normal animals. So you have to learn those. But other than that, it's very simple to read. Your parents will enjoy reading it to your child, and your child should be just enthralled imagining all of the descriptive language in the book. So this is teaching valuable principles using a narrative, and that's a great reason to read it to your children. And it provides many opportunities to discuss important issues like the environment and standing up for what you believe in. The second book I have here is It All Begins with Jelly Beans. I thought it said jelly bellies, and I took it because I thought I want to know how to begin things with jelly bellies, because I love jelly bellies. But it's jelly beans, and it's not about candy at all. It's about two girls who are very different, yet share something in common, and that is their differences. Not with each other, but their differences from the middle school that they attend, from the student body there. They have two elements of their lives that are distressing and private, and makes them seem, or doesn't make them seem, they actually become an objects of ridicule because the students don't understand what's going on, and that's the way middle school there's deal with things like that. They just make fun of people, and this is that story. The two characters, Riley and Meg, are very, very different, yet very, very much the same. Riley comes from a total family, mother, father, brother, all-American family from the front. If you just look in shallowly, you'll see that it's an all-American family. But the secret that the mother keeps and the overbearing supervision she gives her daughter is because her daughter, Riley, has type 1 juvenile diabetes. Now, this is a terrible, terrible disease, and God willing, but usually it is after many, many, many years, terminal. There is no cure for it. There's a lot of treatments for it. My grandson has it, so I'm aware of all the shots and the medications that have to be taken. Anyway, Riley has diabetes that requires her to administer medication to herself throughout the school day. And she and her family had just moved to this town. And so where she lived before, all of her friends understood her situation and were very obliging and accepting and didn't ridicule her and didn't tease her to come do what everybody else is doing that she couldn't do because of her diabetes. Now, Meg has got a different story. Meg's father died the year before, and she doesn't have a brother, but her mother survived, but just barely, with severe, prolonged cases of depression. So Meg is trying to deal with a totally dysfunctional family. Not that Riley's isn't. Riley's family is dysfunctional too, but in a much less dramatic or obvious way. Anyway, Meg's family is struggling. Her mother is in this terrible, deep depression. And so Meg has the responsibility of caretaking not only for her mother, but for her house and for the bills and for the rent, everything that's involved in being an adult. This 11-year-old girl has had to assume. And it's very hard for her. And she is very private. She carries a bag around. Um, that's the first character you meet in the book is her bag because of anxiety attacks. She's under such stress. Anyway, as the economy, as the money in Meg's family dwindles and dwindles and dwindles, she finds she has no money for extra things like shoes. So she ends up wearing house slippers to school. And you can imagine what kind of ridicule, what kind of teasing, what kind of sarcasm these students throw out at her. It's very hard for her, and she spends a lot of time in the nurse's office, where the nurse is very compassionate and will sometimes feed her with some leftover snacks from the teacher's lounge, since money's so tight that sometimes May doesn't get to have a meal. So we have these two girls that seemingly are different. Riley has a clique of friends that are pretty unkind towards Meg. They're pretty unkind towards anybody that they don't decide should be in their clique. But Riley's lucky she gets to be in the clique. But the longer she stays in it, the more she sees that the behavior of these young girls is not good, and it's not kind, and it's not loving. And Riley's not a mean person, but she wants to be part of a group since she just moved there. She is invited to this very private birthday party at a hotel where they're going to have a swimming pool and everybody's going to go swimming except for Riley. And Riley can't go because of the meter that she carries on her stomach and the outlet, what's it called? The shunt that puts in her medication for her diabetes. And also because her mother will provide sandwiches and food that meets the criteria for the diabetic meal, and that will be embarrassing to Riley. And her mother says she can't go anyway because her mother's overly protective and has not given Riley any freedom at all. But this time, Riley's father pitches in with her, and they convince the mother that she can go for a couple of hours. I think 3 hours. Well, she's excited. She goes. She has a good time until, let's go swimming, they say. Let's go swimming. And of course, Riley, I didn't bring my swimsuit. And the head of the clique says, I brought an extra one just for you. Well, there she is. Riley's in the spot. What does she do? Does she want to be like everybody else? Does she want to endanger her life by getting into a swimming pool, knowing full well that that's not a good thing to do and that her mother would be outraged at her for being so reckless? Well, what does she do? She gets in. And repercussions, while not serious physically, really stress her mentally. Well, as Meg sits in the office of the nurse and Riley comes in sometimes to take care of her medical needs, they become friends. And the end of the book tells what their friendship evolved to and what it meant for both girls. Well, I hope you've enjoyed hearing about these two books, Willodeen and It All Begins with Jelly Beans. Thank you very much.